morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host. I am Clay Douglas. We just got in a report today about the Southern Poverty Law, and at the risk of repeating myself, I'll share it with you, but I've been telling you what Southern Poverty Law and the ADL and APAC does and has been doing for years. Fundraising must be down at Southern Poverty Law Center because the KKK and skinhead groups are a distant memory. The folks at Southern Poverty Law have worked feverishly to find radio bad guys so the money would keep rolling in. And of course, that's what they did to me when they listed me in their little booklet that they printed a few million of called False Patriots. ADL beat them to the punch with their armed and dangerous. But the folks at Southern Poverty Law work feverishly to keep that money rolling in. So their new phantom targets are far-right hate groups, says Mark Potok, the so-called senior fellow at SPLC, probably the one that hasn't had his divorce papers released by me, like Morris D's. Mark Potok wrote this in spring 2013 intelligence report, capping 4 years of explosive growth sparked by the election of America's first black president and anger over the economy. Number of conspiracy-minded anti-government patriot groups reached an all-time high of 1,360 in 2012. While the number of hardcore hate groups remained about 1,000, as President Obama enters his second term with an agenda of gun control and immigration reform, the rage on the right is likely to intensify. Richard Cohen, President CEO of the SPLC, sent a letter to Attorney General Holder and Secretary Janet Napolitano of the Department of Homeland Security with this outrageous charge. Because of the looming dangers, we urge you to establish an interagency task force to address the adequacy of the resources devoted to responding to the growing threat of non-Islamic domestic terrorism. A patriot group is identified as a group of individuals who are opposed to gun control and immigration reform, both of which are constitutional issues. So, if you stand against the president or other anti-Second Amendment advocates, then you are a conspiracy-minded anti-government patriot. If immigration reform means advocating amnesty for illegal aliens who were being used as political fodder for the Democratic Party, then you are a conspiracy-minded anti-government patriot. The SPLC is in the fundraising business. They have to create straw man targets in order to keep the checks coming in. And of course, the SPLC had to make its report about race, the election of America's first black president, but in the same report, Potok mentions the anti-government sentiment over gun control. It goes back to the 1990s when Bill Clinton was president. While Clinton was touted as America's first black president, he is white as the driven snow. I suspect he was described as our first black president so that the criticism against his liberal policies could be labeled racist. Now, one of the actions of the far-right militia groups, it wasn't militia groups that killed people in Aurora, Colorado movie theater, or the elementary students in Newtown, Connecticut. No, those were more likely Israeli Mossad or UN hit teams. In fact, there hasn't been a single far-right militia group incident since Obama's been president. We know that Floyd Lee Corkins, who opened fire at the Family Research Center Council, injuring a guard before he was subdued, was not a far-right militia type. In fact, he was in full agreement with the hate group label stamped on many conservative groups. Tom Perkins, president of the FRC, pleaded the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate group label as a contributor to Corkins' actions. After Corkins pleaded guilty, Perkins said the following: "The day Floyd Corkins came into the FRC headquarters and opened fire, wounding one of our team members, I stated that while Corkins was responsible for the shooting, he had been given a license to perpetrate this act of violence by groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has systematically and recklessly labeled every organization with which they disagree as a hate group." Today, both assertions were validated in court as Corkins pleaded guilty to multiple criminal charges, including terrorism. Southern Poverty Law can no longer say that it is not a source for those bent on committing acts of violence. Only by ending its hate labeling practices. Will the SPLC send a message that it no longer wishes to be a source for those who would commit acts of violence that are only designed to intimidate and silence Christians and others who support natural marriage and traditional morality? SPLC never lists leftist groups as hate groups. It's only organization and groups on the so-called right of the political social spectrum. When homosexual groups targeted people who supported California's anti-homosexual marriage Proposition 8, the SPLC remains silent. The SPLC is nothing more than a fundraising machine for leftist causes and high salaries for leftist propagandists. And basically, they are still fudging on this. They're not talking about the Jewish communists. And the SPLC would paint a box of Wheaties as an extremist threat if they thought it would help raise funds. All right. All right. I'm going to bring Dr. Jake Wade up in just a little while. But talk about this. Are Attorney General Holder's statements on banks and drones connected? How far will the government go to defend the too big to fail banks? After a 13-hour filibuster by Senator Paul asking for a yes or no answer, the Attorney General finally said that drones would not be used to kill U.S. citizens who are not engaged in combat. Or did he? The Attorney General of the United States made the following two statements within 48 hours. The President can assassinate American citizens on U.S. soil. And he said the big banks shouldn't be prosecuted as that would destabilize the economy. These statements may at first glance, seem unconnected, and the mainstream media is treating them as separate. True, the government is hell-bent on keeping the giant banks afloat, even though virtually all independent economists, financial experts, and bankers are calling for them to be broken up, and Americans overwhelmingly want the government to get tougher on prosecuting Wall Street fraud. But there might be more to it than that, and Holder's statements may be intimately connected. For example, the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, and other government agencies worked hand in hand with the big banks to violently crack down on the Occupy protests. And what was Occupy protesting? One of the core complaints of the Occupy protesters was that there are two systems of justice. The little guy gets thrown in jail for the smallest infraction, while banksters escape prosecution for their criminal fraud. Occupy also protested the fact that the big banks got bailed out while the rest of us got sold out. In other words, it's exactly the Department of Justice policy for not prosecuting big bank crimes, which was one of Occupy's core complaints. And in response, the federal government sending the goons to crackheads and trash the free speech rights of the protest. This is not an isolated incident. The big banks literally own the politicians. For many years, the government has used anti-terrorist laws mainly to crush political dissent and help the too big to fail businesses. Asking questions about Wall Street shenanigans, speaking out against government policies, and protesting anything are all considered grounds for being labeled a potential terrorist by the government. Whistleblowers and journalists are also treated as terrorists. Indeed, the government agency with the power to determine who gets assassinated is the same agency that is at the center of the ubiquitous, unaccountable surveillance state aimed at American citizens. If this sounds like fearless, breathless fear-mongering, please remember that the U.S. military now considers the American homeland to be a battle zone. And again, folks, I told you about that years ago when I filmed the first Homeland Security meeting, and Colonel John Brinkerhoff told us that we were going to be in for we were in a war. This war would be fought on homeland, on American soil, and the enemy was weak. The enemy didn't have tanks. The enemy didn't have planes. The enemy didn't have that, so they would use unconventional tactics. I told you that. True face of FEMA. He also told you, and I had it in my film, in case of a major disaster like a hurricane or an earthquake of sufficient magnitude, we'd need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people, because some of them just wouldn't follow orders. And that's what they are doing now. Alright, let's see what we can do here. Let's see if this works. Nope.
Hello?
Good morning, Jake Wade. How are you?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me, Jake?
Yeah, good.
All right, sir. Got you up. And I was just talking about Attorney General Holder. He's made some statements that the president can assassinate American citizens on U.S. soil, and that the big banks shouldn't be prosecuted, as that would destabilize the economy. And it's
whose economy is we talking about?
Well, it looks like we're talking about the banks. He was also in this article that I was
But the
sharing.
economy of this country is shaking now. I don't know how you say that's going to unstabilize it. How unstable can it get?
Well, they were talking about the Occupy protesters, that the Department of Homeland Security and FBI worked hand in hand with the big banks to violently crack down on the Occupy protest. And what they were protesting was the two systems of justice. The little guy gets thrown in jail for the smallest infraction, while the bankers escape prosecution for their criminal fraud. And the fact that the big banks got bailed out while the rest of us got sold out. Now, I've said this numerous times, and on my radio show here, that as George Bush was walking out, and of course with George Bush and Bill Clinton all did the same things as Obama is doing here. They set the stage for Obama. They set the stage for what I think is a communist takeover. And what we've been kind of dumbed down here, since I do teach political science, and I am the head of the political science department of your college, Timothy Bible College. It's the government agencies are working for the banks. The banks are ripping off the people right and left, and what they have done is create a police state here in America. I said anytime a man with a badge can walk up to you and say, What's that I smell? Is that marijuana? Have you been smoking marijuana? You got marijuana in that car? Then you live in a police state. If you can go to jail for possessing some of God's green earth in your pocket and you're not harming anyone, then why are we being thrown in jail, made to the tune of 50 million people?
You know I don't smoke marijuana, right?
That's right. I know that. Yes, sir.
Years ago, when I had my engineering business in Houston, Texas, I was pulled over because I was driving my brother's van at the time, and it had curtains on the windows and was purple. That's why they pulled me over, and they wanted to do a search of the van. I was like driving that van, and when I came out, I had a suit on and smoking a cigar, and at the time I had a briefcase in there, and little did I know my brother had stash in there. I didn't, and I was pulled over because of the look of the van, and that should be blatantly illegal in what we call a free country. And I told the cop that. I said, you pulled me over because I appear to be driving a van which maybe is not something you would approve of yourself. It's not my van. It happens to belong to my brother, and I don't do marijuana or drugs of any kind. In fact, I don't even take aspirin. And the guy says, oh, okay, I'm sorry, and apologized, and I went on. But the idea that, it's just what you said, the idea of being able to pull me over because I didn't look right, and this was years ago before they started fussing about profiling. But I've got another question for you, Mr. Douglas.
Go right ahead, sir.
Am I mistaken, or has our administration now put into motion the act of saying they're going to have drones flying over this country that can take you out without having even been indicted by some jury of your peers?
Yes, sir. Now, Rand Paul, who may not be on our side, other than the fact that he's a Ron Paul son, and that he did not back his father. He backed Mitt Romney, who was a Zionist pretender, or sponsored by the whole Zionist movement. I don't know what Iran is doing, but he did a filibuster to supposedly opposing the use of drones in America. But they've already had incidents of drones threatening aircraft, flying too close to commercial airliners, and I think the idea that they could use these to surveil us is as bad as allowing the NSA to tap everybody's phones, which is what they did.
And they're designed to take out humans.
Yes, sir. We are in now. I just talked about that. We were talking about the police before the show started. I did a piece about some people did some interviews with police, and what do we do if somebody's breaking in our house? Well, call us 911. How long does it take you to get there? Well, just 2 or 3 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, depends on traffic. Well, what are we supposed to do till you get here? You and I know the answer. You're kicking in my door, and just, as Joe Biden says, blow them off with a shotgun. But if you wave that shotgun around and you carry that shotgun onto your balcony and fire off a couple of rounds or wave it around, then you can be prosecuted. You can be arrested for what they call menacing.
And they don't kill a guy and just maim him. You could end up not only in prison but paying restitution for his injury.
Well, that's right. It's but this back to this bankers and Attorney General Holder. It's the Department of Justice's policy of not prosecuting big bank crimes, which was one of Occupy's core main complaints, and in response, the federal government sending goods to crack heads. For many years, the government has used anti-terror laws, mainly to crush political dissent, to help the too big to fail businesses. Again, at the risk of repeating myself, I've told people this time and time again, that the war on terror, and I know this because of what I filmed at the first Homeland Security meeting in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They said we're in for a long war, and this war may go longer than the Cold War, and the enemy's weak. The enemy doesn't have planes or tanks or bombs or things like that. No helicopters. The enemy's weak, so they're going to use unconventional tactics. And in case of a single outbreak of smallpox, in a major metropolitan area, in case of a nuclear attack on American soil, or a hurricane or a natural disaster along the New Madrid Fault, for instance, of major significance, we'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained troops to control the American people, because some of them just won't follow orders. And I've told people again that the war on terror is a war against anyone, anywhere that doesn't want to go along with one world government, one world banking. The Council on Foreign Relations, the UN has all made that pretty clear. And that's where we are right now. They are making us with these and the drones and the armored vehicles with the 2-inch thick glass side windows. They're being unloaded, they're being shipped into this country, they're being brought into this country, and they've even got some foreign troops that showed up like in places like Sandy Hook. They could be Russian, they could be Israeli.
Well, I don't like to be overly political, as you know, but my read on this is, who are they afraid of? Oops. It's we who are legally carrying weaponry. We have various weapons ourselves, generally just to protect our home. I've got a shotgun that I would probably use on a coyote before anything else, but I'm capable of pretty good shot. And I don't want to advise anybody to come get my gun, but most of us who have guns are not interested in taking on the U.S. government, but it appears to me that we are who they're afraid of.
You're absolutely right. And I also want to mention, we really have answers for this. There's new technology that I'm going to be including in my next article that is probably the equivalent of the internet. Now, what happened with the internet is it gave us the ability to learn. It's almost like being able to, it's as it is above, so it is below. And up above, we know God is as the international, the cosmic mind. He omniscient and omnipotent. He knows everything, knows anything's going to happen, knows what's going on. And the internet has almost given us that capability. And it's given us the ability to communicate and to learn and to research. And that's almost backfired on them. Without the internet, without the computers, they wouldn't be able to run their little banking scam, their credit card scam, their debit card scam. And the double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword.
You have a statement on your webpage right now that I think it's on there where you've even announced that I'm going to be your guest for a little bit today, that says "Take action now."
Yes, sir.
And I think that's critical. All we're talking about, all that you're bringing up, all that the truth seekers puts out, all that the whistleblowers are saying, is for the most part true, and it doesn't need to be much of it to be true for it to create the necessity for taking action. But we are in bad shape. We're in a better get going posture in this country, and those of us who know the truth are going to have to lead and do something to resist this, whether it be the Republic of Texas coming out and actually, standing on their own, or pastors doing that, which I don't see happening. People like you and me, there may not be enough of us, but I do believe there are enough Christian patriots in this country that would like to have the country back and consider the direction of this country to be absolutely wrong. But I look back at Job. In the 3rd chapter of Job, Job is talked to by one of his so-called friends, but he actually says some pretty good things relevant to nowadays. He's saying, okay, you're in a bad shape. You've lost all your kids, you lost your house, you lost all your stuff, you're destitute, you're sitting on a pile of garbage, and your boils are so bad. And by the way, I just had something like that in the middle of my back. They ain't fun.